โมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะพุทธังธัมมังสังฆังนัมมัสสามิ As a Buddhist monk, there's many questions that people will often ask you. And one of them is, what kind of qualities does a person need to become enlightened? Of course, the way the Buddha described the path of practice that leads to enlightenment, well, there's many, many qualities that one is developing. All of them have one thing in common. We call them wholesome or skillful qualities, kusala Dhamma, as opposed to unwholesome or unskillful qualities, which are leading us away from enlightenment towards more suffering. So this is often where we begin our practice, is learning to recognize the difference between the wholesome and the unwholesome in our own mind. So just now we were practicing mindfulness of breathing. So sati or mindfulness, this quality of knowing, is considered to be wholesome, skillful. So it's a quality to be brought up, developed more and more. You might say it's a skill, a life skill that you can cultivate. And there's obviously many other wholesome, skillful qualities that we can develop. And often the path is as simple as that, developing the skillful, the wholesome, and abandoning or letting go of the unwholesome, the unskillful. But to do that, you have to be able to recognize them in your experience. You know, we begin our practice by listening to teachers, and that's why it's important to have Kalyana Mitta, people who can guide us, give us encouragement, help explain the path to us. And also to read, we listen. But then we have to take a step back from what we've heard and learn from our direct experience. Yeah? My teacher Ajahn Kalyano used to say, it's one thing to read about unwholesome states of mind that have to be abandoned, such as greed, anger, delusion. But it's another to actually know them when they arise in your heart. Because all unwholesome, unskillful states of mind, they're rooted in ignorance or delusion, not knowing the truth, not seeing the truth. So by their nature, they're deluding. They trick us, they catch us out, we miss them. Because if you could truly see the nature of an unwholesome state of mind, greed, anger, delusion, jealousy, fear, anxiety, there's so many. If you could truly see the unwholesome nature of them, you wouldn't follow them, you wouldn't hold on to them, you wouldn't keep them in your mind. Because they can't help but produce suffering for you. And nobody wants to suffer. Everybody wants to be free from suffering, whether it's physical pain or mental pain. So if you can truly see the nature of an unwholesome train of thought, an unwholesome state of mind, you would let it go quite naturally. The trouble is, half the time we miss it, we don't see it. We don't see the unwholesome, unskillful nature of our thoughts, so we hold on to them. And the wholesome thoughts, often we're missing. We're not consciously developing them. We're not recognizing them when they're there. We miss them, miss out on them, don't appreciate them, or just let them go. We let go of the wrong thing. We let go of the mindfulness and hold on to the confusion. We let go of the kindness and go back to anger. We let go of the contentment and go towards discontent. A lot of this is just habit, because our mind is untrained, unskilled, you could say. We're unskilled workers. Even if we're skilled in the worldly sense, you've got your qualifications, you've trained, you've got your knowledge, you apply for a job as a skilled worker. Maybe you even have MBA or a PhD, and you apply for your job as a skilled worker. But if you haven't really understood your own mind very well yet, you're still unskilled in the way of Dhamma. And that's something that's hard to accept, because often we confuse worldly knowledge and skill with the Dhamma, and we think, well, if I have got my degree or my training diploma, then I should be knowledgeable and skilled, and we bring that attitude into our Dhamma practice. So Ajahn Chah used to say, well, sometimes we just have to put our worldly knowledge down at the doorstep of the practice, set it aside, otherwise it can confuse things or become an obstacle. And even if we have got a degree, then we'll still have the suffering of someone with a degree, or if we've got a master's, we'll have the suffering of someone with a master's. We've got the PhD, we'll have the suffering of somebody with a PhD. And suffering is not immune from the mind of someone even with a lot of knowledge of the world and a lot of skills in the world. Suffering is something we have to understand directly through our knowing our own mind and removing the causes of it, which is these unwholesome, unskillful states of mind. So we have to train in mindfulness and wisdom, investigation. This is the way out of suffering. And it's training ourselves to really directly know ourselves as human beings, know this mind, know our thoughts, know our intentions, our views, our attitudes, and start rooting out where the causes of suffering are, recognizing them and rooting them out. Another question they're always asking at the moment is how should we respond to the chaos of the world, the pandemic, the wars? Well, do this practice more and more. What is the best way to respond to war is put your heart into the practice. Remove the roots of war from your own mind at least, even if you can't stop other people from fighting and suffering. You can certainly do something with your own mind. What are the roots of war? Again, it's delusion, greed, anger and delusion. Remove those qualities from your own mind, those unwholesome qualities, and already you are reducing the tendency of the world to go to war, at least in your own mind. And if you learn anything from that, gain anything from that, gain some peace and understanding, then we can pass that on to other people maybe. Encourage them to do the same. And to do this, we need some faith, some confidence that it's worthwhile, it's a worthwhile activity. So ideally you meet an enlightened person who can tell you the benefits of this practice, lay it all out for you in front of you and say, look, if you practice this, it'll be worthwhile for you. It'll be for your own interest, your own benefit. If that person is truly awakened, truly enlightened, well, they may have there may be something about them that convinces you. Certainly their words, their experience that they explain to you, they pass on to you, may seem to make good sense, and it may have a ring of truth to you when you listen, when you hear. Sometimes we don't have access to teachers, Kalyana Mitta, certainly not awakened teachers maybe. So we can also use other means. We can read, and we still have access to the suttas, the words of the Buddha, and the words of awakened teachers. I'd recommend one, Ajahn, but there's others as well. You take those words and really put them to the test. But you need that motivation in the beginning, the faith, the confidence that it can be done. This is something that human beings can do. They can learn about their experience from their own minds. They can abandon the unwholesome and cultivate the wholesome. This can be done. I can do it. Others have done it. It's possible. If you have this as your starting point, this is where you get your energy, your willingness to put yourself to the test, to use yourself as the subject matter for this learning experiment. Because we really do need to be quite bold and brave to start looking at our own minds. Because looking at, particularly when unwholesome states of mind arise, they're not beautiful in their nature. The Buddha, one way he described them is they're ugly, they're unbeautiful. Greed is not a nice state of mind to look at. Anxiety is unpleasant to be with, fear is unpleasant, anger and aversion or hatred is unpleasant to look at. So you have to have some initial willingness to be willing to look at your own mind and see that that's going to be value, it's going to be to your benefit. And it's one of the hardest parts of the practice of Buddhism and meditation and mindfulness, all of it. One of the hardest parts is just getting people to start. Once they start, then one thing can lead to another in a good way. But getting people to start is part of the hardest thing, one of the hardest things. One of the things that does prompt people to begin investigating their own mind more is when they have more serious suffering arise. So you always hear this sort of comment, oh, only people with a lot of suffering go to the monastery or go to the meditation retreat. Well, fine, if that's the reason that you've gone, good. Unfortunately, people in their delusion often look down on people who go to a meditation retreat or a temple saying, oh, they must be suffering, there's something wrong in their life, they have to go. And this person who's saying that comment, as if they don't have any suffering and they don't need to do those things, so they don't practice because they're still good. But anyone who's practiced a bit will know really what it means is they're just not observing and aware of their own suffering yet. And you might say they're complacent or taking things for granted. So sometimes suffering can be a useful stimulus for the practice. So don't be afraid of it. We're not looking for suffering in our life, but it will actually come along sooner or later. And that's often the beginning point, isn't it, of why we practice. You've noticed something's wrong. You've noticed your mind is not that peaceful. Why am I always getting worried about things? Why am I always falling into anger and irritation? Why am I endlessly seeking distraction, different kinds of pleasure? Often this is the starting point for coming to the practice. But then you hear the Dhamma or read the Dhamma and you get some inspiration. And you say, oh, other people have practiced and they've got something from this practice, so if they can, then maybe I can. So you begin. So perhaps you do a meditation course, or you listen to talks like this, and that becomes the starting point. But then you have to take what you've heard and learned and put it into practice. And unfortunately, the reality is you have to do it over and over again as well. Because we haven't trained ourselves much in the past, we have all these habits of mind that we've brought along with us to this point in our life. So it's quite natural for our mind to slip back into anxiety, greed, desire, attachment, anger, all the kinds of suffering. We so easily slip into them because we've done it before. The pathways of our mind are all well established, well trodden. It's easy for us to fall back into them. If you keep following your old habits, well, they just get reinforced, don't they? If we do nothing about it, we just let things take their course, well, our minds will keep slipping back into greed, anger, delusion, and unwholesome states. Because that's the nature of an untrained mind. It goes downhill, goes down towards those kinds of suffering and the causes of suffering. And it takes effort to practice, and sometimes we just can't be bothered, either because we've fooled ourselves into thinking we don't need to, or sometimes, unfortunately, our suffering is such that it makes us feel just too weak to even try. But the Buddha encouraged us to, out of compassion, he said, do try. It's worth it. We have the potential, everyone has the ultimate potential for enlightenment within them. It's not like there's only a few chosen people and the rest of us are going to struggle and never get there. We've all got the potential within us, but we do have to put effort into the practice. And you just have to start where you're at. So if your mind is full of fear and anxiety or despair, anger, so be it. That's where you have to start. But one good thing about the practice of mindfulness is, the quality of mindfulness is not judgmental. It's not adding to your suffering. Whenever you bring up mindfulness and apply your mind to the present moment, you're not adding to your suffering. And that's one of the first obstacles, isn't it? As you bring up a wholesome state of mind, mindful awareness, you have to recognize that even if it shows you that you have been previously falling into anger, delusion, worry, it's not the cause of those states. It's just showing you what's there. So you need a bit of patience and strength as you do this. So another of those qualities, that once you have faith and confidence to practice and you're putting effort into bringing up mindfulness, well, you need patience as well to support it. Because your mind will naturally recoil from what it doesn't like. We don't like to admit that we're angry or that we're worried. We don't like to witness those states of mind. But the quality of mindfulness is the quality of witnessing, observing the way things are and not adding on to it. And that's where the strength of mindfulness is that you're not adding to your suffering, you're knowing it, you're exposing it, revealing it, but you're just witnessing it. And if you can remind yourself of that, your mind will incline more towards mindfulness, and just knowing the way things are. And you get strength from that. If you string together a few moments of mindfulness already, your mind gets a little bit stronger, a little bit brighter, a little bit better. And that's where you get your energy and strength to keep doing it. If you've done it before, you can do it again. If you brought your attention to the present moment, observe what's going on, even if there's a lot of negativity rolling around your experience. When you bring up mindfulness, you're seeing it and you're starting to incline your mind towards something better, something that is wholesome or skillful. Kusala Dhamma, mindfulness. And from mindfulness, you get knowledge, but inner knowledge, knowledge of what's going on. You start to compare what is what. You're seeing these unwholesome states of mind are suffering and creating suffering, whereas the way of mindfulness and investigation is the way out of suffering. That becomes clearer. What the path is becomes clearer. What the way that leads to more suffering is becomes clearer. What the way out of suffering becomes clearer. Just as like when you go for a bushwalk and you get temporarily lost, but then through your efforts, you rediscover the path out. And the more you walk along it, the more familiar things become, and you realize you're going to get out of the wilderness. You feel relief, you feel good. And it gets a bit easier because there is a way out. And you're following it. So we have to make that effort. We have the confidence in the Buddha and his teachings and the teachers that we've met or heard. And then you have to have the confidence to put it into practice. And then you start to get some of the benefit, just knowing the way things are rather than adding to it. If you're not adding to your suffering, really it's already reducing in your experience. So even if you're very angry or very afraid or very full of lust or desire for something and it's really obsessing your mind, as soon as you establish a moment of mindfulness, you're weakening that old habit to go in that old way of thinking. You're becoming aware of it and then you're weakening it. And so those trains of thought start to fade out quicker, don't they? As you start to establish mindfulness, you're recognizing thoughts as just thoughts. Trains of thought as just a train of thought. Feelings, the same feelings that you've previously found very overwhelming, unpleasant, and caused you all kinds of inner turmoil. Maybe as you become a little bit more mindful, you realize it's just a feeling. And maybe you can bear with it, you can be with it for a while, and then it starts to fade out quite naturally because you're not feeding it. Generally, the experience of suffering is made up of feeling, a perception, and then thoughts. And these reinforce each other. The perception of whatever it is that's bringing you desire or worry or fear or anger. There's a feeling with it, unpleasant feeling, a feeling of discontent in one way or another. And then there's thinking that reflects that and leads you in the way of feeding that whole experience, adding to it. But as soon as you practice mindfulness, what happens? You're interrupting that process. You start to reduce the amount of the thinking, slows down, you're bearing with the feeling, you're knowing the feeling, but the whole experience starts to weaken because of the presence of mindfulness. And that's something we can prove every day, even with short periods of practice, even like 1 minute of mindfulness in the middle of your day when you're feeling stressed, angry, worried, sleepy, whatever the particular thing coming up in your mind. By putting attention, say on the breath, for example, bringing your mind to the present moment, you may have a particular feeling or train of thought that's bothering you. It starts to fade because you become aware of it. And if it's unwholesome, you see it's only leading to feelings of suffering, experience of suffering, lack of peace. And that's something you learn and you can relearn and you can experience it over and over again. And then you get more of the confidence and the strength of mind that says, I want to do more practice. It becomes more interesting to you, more desirable to practice. This is why mindfulness is such a key practice to the Buddhist path. It's not the only quality you're developing, but it's the one that leads on to wisdom and understanding. But sometimes you also have to be aware as you practice mindfulness, particularly as you're practicing mindfulness, say, on the breath or a particular object, you'll also start to feel more calm, more relaxed. And often people will just want to accept that as the kind of goal of the practice or the best they can achieve. They feel a bit more calmer than before because they've let go of some of the unpleasant feelings, emotions, negative states of mind. They've gone, so they're feeling more comfortable in themselves, more at ease, which is good. But then that's it. They take that as good enough, the goal, when it's not. What the Buddha encouraged us to do is actually use that as a platform for investigating further, deeper, to develop more wisdom, more insight into our experience. And that takes training as well. So we have to be willing to arouse wisdom, to stimulate our wisdom as we've experienced more calm, more peace. Don't just take that as good enough. Don't just be complacent with that, but actually start searching around. Because what you find is as the feeling of calm fades, maybe if you've been doing a period of meditation and you have been calm, it starts to fade, but then all the old unwholesome states of mind can return, and very quickly as well. If we haven't trained in wisdom, we have to also train the mind to investigate more closely where are these unwholesome states of mind coming from, where are they being fed from. We have to look more closely at the attachment, the identification with this body, with feelings, with thoughts, and with this sense of self. Because where there's an attachment to a sense of self, this is what feeds greed, anger and delusion. And that's something we have to investigate. Ajahn Chah used to say, if you're not sure where to investigate, come back to the body, the physical body. Start looking at it. Because so often we're taking our body for granted, and the basis for fear, anxiety, so much of it is based in our body, attaching to it, identifying with it as a self, and then when something goes wrong or something's threatening us, we immediately fall into fear, anxiety, worry. So before that's even happened, start investigating this body. Contemplate it. How real is this body? How much do you control it? Can you really call it yours? So what is this body made up of? So the Buddha gave teaching on the four elements, or many teachings, different ways of contemplating the body to see it as four elements. Earth element is the solidity of the body. The water element is the cohesion, the glue of the body. The air element, the breath and the oxygen that goes around the body, and the fire element, the temperature in the body, the feelings of heat, cold. These are qualities, four different elements that we can focus on to give us a new understanding of this body, to give us a sense of detachment towards the body, because the more we investigate it and see it's a collection of these four elements, this is what undermines the sense of self, the sense of taking the body for granted, just assuming it's my body to control. And if you take, say, just the earth element, how can we contemplate that? Well, for example, Ajahn Chah used to say, take the hair of the head. Just take some time to contemplate the hair of your head. What is it? What's its nature? It's hair follicles that come out of the skin. Are they really a self? Do they really belong to you? Or are they just something that grows quite naturally, and you can't control how fast your hair grows, or you can't control it, stop it from falling out sometimes. Even when you're young, your hair falls out when you comb it or brush it. You can't stop your hair from becoming greasy. It has an unattractive side to it. It produces grease from the same pores of the skin that the hair comes out of. It gets dirt attached to it, dust, dirt, so we have to keep washing it, otherwise it smells. If you go on a camping holiday or something and you don't wash your hair, it really starts to smell. If you're on your own, maybe you don't worry too much, but if other people are with you, it starts to become antisocial. We feel awkward. If your hair drops out onto your clothing, it doesn't look good, so you want to brush it off. If it drops into your food, it makes you not want to eat that food. If someone else's hair drops into your food, you complain, waiter, there's a hair in my soup. That's teaching you something. It's teaching you about the earth element. This earth element is the solid part of the body, and hair is a representative of the earth element. Who really owns that hair? It's sitting there on the top of our head, and we shape it and style it and dye it and do all kinds of stuff with it. But really its nature is it's just the earth element coming from the protein cells of the body, coming out on the top of our head, and then sooner or later it falls out, or we cut it off. And when you get old, it drops out, maybe never to return if you're going bald. Who owns that? Who does it belong to? This is something to contemplate when your mind is calm. It gives you a new way of looking at this body and a new way of looking at other people's bodies as well. And you see, everybody has that one thing in common. They all have hair. Everybody's hair comes from the earth element. So whether you're looking at male, female, from whichever part of the globe, whether it's someone you like, someone you don't like, they're just earth element sitting on top of people's head in form of hair. And you can go through all the 32 parts of the body in the same way, contemplating them and seeing how they're growing from these elements. The water element in your body, and most of your body is made up from water. It's what sticks the cells together, glues them together. If you don't drink enough, you can get ill very quickly, especially in the summer or in the heat. If you don't hydrate your body, you quickly feel ill. You can die very quickly if you don't drink. But that water element, who does it belong to? We say, my body, it looks good, it looks bad, it's the basis for lust, for greed and desire, or it's the basis for hatred, but it's just water element. So these four elements, you can investigate them for as long as you want, as long as your mind is calm, mindfulness is there. Take the time just to go a bit deeper into your experience. Because normally we're caught up into the superficial appearance of things. And that's why we're constantly falling into attraction, aversion, greed, anger, delusion. Because we're working on that level, the superficial appearance of things, the conventional reality. I'm a human being and I look good or I look bad. I look old, I look young. I feel good, I feel bad. So much of this conventional reality is uninvestigated. We just take it for granted. We put a name on somebody, and according to our beliefs and our views and how we describe ourselves, how we describe other people, that's the level we're working on, and that's feeding a lot of this negativity in our mind. The likes and the dislikes, the desires, the aversions, the ambitions, the disappointments. It's on this level, conventional reality. When you come to just observe the earth element in this body, the water element in this body, it's cutting through that. You're going deeper into experience. You're going to what we call paramattha Dhamma, that can help you just see the true nature of experience in this world. It's just earth element. When you look at a building, however well designed it is, and that's not to disparage architects and builders and engineers and people, but a building is largely the earth element, isn't it? It's solid bits of bricks, mortar, steel. That's the earth element, and it's something that is constantly changing. So this world that we live in, the things are changing, these bodies are changing, these elements are constantly rubbing against each other. That's one way the Buddha described form. These four elements are difficult to be with because they don't stay still and they don't stay comfortable all day long. They're rubbing against each other. So literally, we rub against the floor. As we're walking, our feet rub against the shoes and the floor. As we sit down, our legs are rubbing against the seat or the floor. We even rub against each other, don't we? We get sores from our legs rubbing against each other when we walk or run for a long time. We get different muscle pains from using our limbs a lot. Our eyes get tired from just looking a lot. Our ears can even get worn out through hearing too many loud sounds. The nature of these four elements that are combined together to form a human being is that they rub against each other. They're difficult to endure with. And a lot of our life is spent hiding from that, running away from that, not investigating it, just distracting ourselves from the true nature of the elements of this body. This is why it's so peaceful when you bring your mind to see the truth of them. Because the truth is actually liberating to us. It liberates the mind from delusion. And how does delusion manifest? It manifests as greed, anger, love and hate. When you see through to the true nature of this body, it's liberating, so it brings you a sense of calm, peace. But this is coming from wisdom now, not just from the calm of mindfulness. It's also the peace of wisdom or insight into the true nature of this body. You think about it, once you realize the impermanent nature of this body, how these four elements can't stay together permanently. They're constantly reacting, degenerating, aging, falling apart. They're painful to be with. And ultimately they separate through death. Once you're seeing that, what happens? You realize everyone is in the same position. Everyone in this world who has a body also has to endure their body. They also experience the pain of sitting down, of walking, of hunger, of cold. They have to deal with painful feelings just as we do. Suddenly you realize everyone's in exactly the same position as you. Everyone has to deal with aging. Everyone has to face death. There's no one in this world who will not die. So immediately the desire for conflict, war fades when you have that insight. There really is no point trying to kill anyone in this world because we've all got to die anyway. It doesn't even, there's not even any need to hurt anybody because we all are hurting already. Having a human body, it's painful. It's not easy to be with a human body. So wisdom and insight immediately leads on to compassion. Understanding, it's not easy living as a human being. Whatever you do, whoever you are, you're rich, you're poor, you're famous, you're completely unknown, anonymous. Wherever you are, you're in the city, you're in the forest, it's difficult being a human being. Having a human body is not easy. That's the reality, but seeing that is a liberating force on your mind. You have no more delusions. And you don't get too obsessed and give too much importance to a body, because you know it's ultimately impermanent and not self, and it's destined to die and break apart. One of the first Dhamma talks I ever heard was a monk telling me that, did I know that I'm breathing in the same oxygen molecules that Julius Caesar was breathing in? Even though Julius Caesar lived 2,000 years ago, there's only a finite number of oxygen molecules in the universe, in the world, and they're just going around, and one person breathes them in, and then someone else breathes them in. We breathe out carbon dioxide, but then chemical changes take place, and the trees in the world produce a bit more oxygen, and then we breathe it in again. So nothing is ours. So, if there's someone on the other side of the globe fighting in a war, sooner or later you'll be breathing in oxygen that they breathed in. When you start to think on this deeper level, or see the truth on this deeper level, the need for conflict starts to fade, and you realize it's not worth it, is it? It's not worth having conflicts and fights, whether it's just petty arguments in your family or your workplace or world wars. You don't need to, because everyone's going to die anyway. Seeing the truth of this human body, the nature of it, seeing it as made up of 4 elements, removes love and hate from your experience, little by little, maybe not all at once, but little by little, and replaces it with wisdom and compassion. Love and hate is still coming from the delusions of the mind. You love something, but that's coming from a selfish view of wanting that thing to bring you pleasure, make you happy. Hate is because you see it as a threat, or it's brought you some pain, so you want to blame it and get rid of it, attack it. The Buddha was teaching us to develop insight into the nature of this body and mind, see it as impermanent, as not self, so that our thinking and our view and our way of relating to the world falls in line with the truth. And then what's left is kindness, compassion and wisdom. Sometimes people overlook the directness and the simplicity of the Dhamma. You're contemplating the earth element in your body can solve so many problems in your life. It brings you literally down to earth, and you see the similarities between yourself and others, and the superficiality of all these negative emotions we get caught into every day. And we give them less importance then. We give more importance to the truth, less importance to our preferences and the biases of mind that cause us so much trouble. If you've got skills and you can live in this world and earn money and wealth, and you've got knowledge and skills, great, but use them to help other people who are maybe less fortunate than you. If you've only got a little bit, then that's fine. Use that to help yourself, and you might still be able to help other people. But in the end, it's just the 4 elements, isn't it? Whether you have a lot or a little, the world is made up of these 4 elements. And if you can see that, then there's nothing to fight over, nothing to compete over. You tend to become more generous, and you share what you have with others, because it's just 4 elements. And you know one day this body is going to break apart. With age, with sickness, we get death. They say somebody who understands this, they see the impermanent nature of the 4 elements in their own body, they're no longer afraid of death. They die peacefully, they're not afraid. They no longer get lost in love that brings them grief. When their loved ones die, they understand that's the nature of reality. Everybody gets old, sick and dies. And they don't hate. They don't have to fight and have wars. all from just seeing the four elements in their own body. It brings a great steadiness to the mind. Contemplating the four elements, say the earth element, brings you both the peace of samadhi and then the deeper peace of insight, knowing the emptiness of this body. It's just not anything to cling to. You know, they say when the enlightened ones, they reach the point of death, there's no fear, worry, grief or sadness. They just know it's just the natural separation of these four elements. There was one enlightened monk in the time of the Buddha, and the Buddha asked him whether he still has suffering, and he said, "No, I don't have any more suffering because I know that this body is just the earth element, and there's no self in that. There's no need to suffer. There's no need to fear or worry. There's nothing to grasp at." And what's the earth like? Well, the earth never suffers, does it? When you pour rubbish on the earth, which we do every day, we have landfill, and we take all the rubbish and dump it on the land and bury it, even bury nuclear waste in the earth. But the earth never complains, just copes with it. Or we put the most beautiful things on, the most beautiful people, the most beautiful objects of the world, art or treasure. Put that on the earth, or the most sweet smelling flowers, and the earth doesn't complain either. The earth is just calm, equanimous towards all conditions. That's why it's so grounding. That's why people suffer so much in an earthquake. Even if it's a minor earth tremor, people really panic, don't they? Because we take it for granted, and we rely so much on the earth. But at the same time, we treat the earth really badly, don't we? We abuse it, we pollute it, we plunder the resources, we fight over the resources. There's actually enough resources in the world for everyone to have plenty to eat, a place to live. But because of our greed, we fight over it, and we destroy other people's property and lives in the pursuit of our own more selfish desires. But actually there's plenty of the earth to go around for everyone. The night of his enlightenment, the Buddha was sitting under the Bodhi tree, just before his enlightenment, when all the kilesas, greed, anger and delusion were coming up in his mind. What did he do? He touched the ground, the earth. Said, may the earth be my witness. Because we really survive in this world because of the earth, don't we? We get our food from it, we live on it. So the Buddha touched the earth. So we have this Buddha statue in front of our hall with the earth. We call it the earth witness. May the earth witness. And the Buddha said, I'm not going to stop my pursuit of the path to awakening until my mind is fully free from suffering, free from attachment, the causes of suffering. The earth was so important, he asked it to be a witness for him. The legend has it that the Earth Deva, what we often call Mother Earth or Prame Torani, the Earth Deva came up and flooded Mara's armies who had been threatening the Buddha. And sometimes karma is like that. We do get natural disasters that come up. The earth is an element, like the water is an element, the earth is an element. They're not always reliable. But still we should learn to manage them the best we can, look after them, look after this world. If we look after the earth, then it will provide a place for us to practice for many years to come. It's a very good reflection for getting you to see the true nature of things, develop insight into the impermanent, unsatisfactory nature of these physical elements. They're not ultimately. We have to see that to liberate our mind from craving and attachment that causes us suffering. So I'll leave you with these reflections tonight.